Here we see the Aleph, and Rav Kook reflects on its meaning, but also on its shape as we go through. You'll notice here we have a shape above, which some people think is a yud. We have a shape below, which sometimes is also seen as a yud. We have this diagonal line that moves from left to right that's in between. Some people call this a vav, and Rav Kook doesn't, so we don't need to go into those particular teachings. But just to notice the way that this particular aleph is drawn, it has this sense of transparency to it. Aleph does not have its own sound. In the Hebrew alphabet, it is, well, you could call it a glottal stop if you're being really technical, but most Kabbalistic interpreters have understood this as a non-sound letter, a consonant that is only filled by the sound of the vowels that either precede it or follow it. So, in other words, this first letter of the Hebrew alphabet is empty. It is soundless. It is the one at the beginning of the entire fabric of creation, which does not have any sound or substance of its own. And yet, from it, all the other letters and all the other realities will inevitably emerge. In this way of understanding the letters, the spiritual sense of them, the understanding is often that they are archetypes or metaphysical building blocks of the spiritual world. And like Sefirot, we can notice these qualities in our world as well. If we take all of these sounds together, we can understand how the world was created through speech, according to the story in Genesis in the first chapter of the Torah. So this is one spiritual essence that comes into the world from the divine self, and as we'll see, is very intimately bound and connected to the essence of divinity itself, while also being the first moment of the distinction from God and the divine self. So Rav Kook begins. The Aleph awakens the consciousness of the origin, the primordial beginning within us. In Hebrew, ha'aleph me'ir banu et hamachshava shel hareshit, ha'hatchala haktuma. Another way to translate this would be the aleph awakens in us the thought of the beginning, the primordial start. The aleph is not the first thought. The aleph is not the primordial beginning, but when we gaze unto the aleph, when we encounter the aleph, it awakens within us the consciousness of that beginning. It is the first letter, and it points us towards the first anything that ever existed. We behold its greatness and are astonished at the preciousness of its vision. The Aleph says to us endlessly to listen, to study, to Aleph. The word Aleph itself can mean to learn or to acquire knowledge. So the Aleph points us towards the primordial unity and tells us, listen, study, pay attention. The word ulpan, which has the same root letters as the letter Aleph, if you've heard of an ulpan when people study modern Hebrew in Israel, for example, it's often called going to ulpan. It's got the same letters as the word Aleph. It's a translation of learning. So he's saying that Aleph itself, the word itself, has to do with learning, acquiring knowledge, which is distinct from the knowledge itself. We'll see there's a a piece of this idea. It's a translation of learning. He means literally the word ulpan is an Aramaic word that could be translated as learning, but also the Aleph's energy is one of translator from the most primordial into something we can begin to access if we are subtle and we are refined enough. The neshama knows everything that comes through study is not the source itself. The soul knows. We know on a deep level that what we encounter through study is not the divine self. It's a translation. The origin is the inner idea that isn't articulated. The source itself is beyond knowledge, beyond words. And the Aleph, as this silent letter, it points us towards it, but it in of itself is not that essential inner light. That origin, that source, it was and it will be the inheritance of the world in the great day. This great day is a reference to the world to come, the bridging of the spiritual realm and the physical realm. It's one way of understanding what comes after the coming of the Messiah in classic Jewish belief. But for Rav Kook in particular, it has that essence of the bridging of the physical and the spiritual realms. On that day, none of us will learn anymore to know the ineffable, because everyone will know God from their youth until old age. One of the things that is imagined in that future state, that future existence, is the revealing of the concealed. There are other writings on this subject. Rav Kook has poems that describe his vision of the world to come. Nothing is hidden, everything is known. And whether we posit, whether we believe that our world is ultimately heading in the direction of a state of permanent enlightenment, there is a lot that we can gain from this kind of teaching. Hopefully, we can have encounters with the beyond. We can know that there's something that we can access that isn't always available here. The simple act of learning itself is about revealing that which is concealed. And that, in this Rav Kook sense, is what it means to Aleph, to teach and to learn and to access something that is hidden. He imagines a day where everything is like that, for all times, where we're born with this knowledge of the divine, this ineffable enlightenment that's instilled in us. I think that'd be really nice. I'm personally not holding out hope for it to come. It's not part of my the main way that I relate to these kinds of teachings or to Judaism itself. I think that if we're going to have a taste of heaven on earth, that happens week to week, moment to moment. But this world involves some degree of work and will always involve some degree of work and learning. But regardless, this is what he's saying, the difference between the knowledge itself and this Aleph process. The Aleph is the translation of the source. Here he says, study is translation. Study is translation. We're translating. He says, study is the idea of the back of the faces of the realm of consciousness. God says to Moses, you can't see my face, but I'm going to pass by you and you can get a glimpse of my back. The face is the inner. The face is the essence itself. The word panim Face is related to the word bifnim, which means interior. It's related to the word pnimiut, which is the esoteric, the juice of the teachings, the inside, the inner essence, the spirituality of it. And he's saying when we study, we get to see the back, not the face. We get to encounter the veiled surface of the essence. And in that process, there is a translation which occurs from the thing in and of itself into how we're able to access it. Truly, even if we are masters of a field, all we can hope for is to encounter things that meet us where we are. No one can skip knowledge and understanding. And to try and do that, well, what does God say? No one can see me and live. It's not possible to grasp the inner essence of itself, but what we can do is bit by bit, step by step, begin to access what lies beyond the veiled surface of the essence itself. And he says, Lo ha'arut hanishmatit ki'im tademata. This is not a spiritual awakening, but it's a spiritual slumber. It's still spiritual. But when we engage with Aleph modalities, we are not becoming that which precedes the Aleph Bet, the infinite self. We are participating. That would be the awakening. We are participating rather in something that is spiritual and making contact, but he compares it to a slumber as opposed to an awakening, which it's an interesting thing to say because this is the pinnacle of his metaphysical ladder, the Aleph, the unity, the closest thing that points towards the divine self. He's still calling it a spiritual slumber. I think Rav Kook had very high standards for his spiritual insight, for his life, as evidenced by his life and his writings. Yeah, but an interesting question to ask ourselves is what does that mean that what we might normally call an awakening, he's calling a slumber? So he says, this is the lesson of the Aleph's teaching in its name, that Aleph has to do with ulpan, with translation, Aleph and teaching and learning, and Aleph to be part of that learning and study. He's saying all of this is connected to the meaning there of that study and learning. And he's going to move on to another way of understanding Aleph, which is Aleph as a number, which there's a lot of great interest here. And then from then we'll go on to Aleph as the shape as well. The expression that is nearest to the numerical Aleph will bring us to think about the level of the fourth number. So to say the word 1,000, it's Aleph. It's the same letters as Aleph, and Aleph can mean thousands. It's another meaning of the word. It's a very productive, flexible root in Hebrew. So if we want to understand something else about Aleph, we have to start understanding that there are singles, there are tens, there are hundreds, and there are Alephs. There are thousands. And he calls these different levels of, you could say, logic or intellect or reasoning. There's sealed logic. There's the logic of thought. There's verbal logic. And then there's heard or revealed logic. So sealed logic could be associated with the world of emanation in the four worlds of Kabbalah. And that is ineffable. It's quiet. It is really not able to be articulated. That's this realm of spirit, the world of emanation, world of Atzilut associated with the soul of the metaphysical realm. And then we have the logic of thought. The logic of thought has to do with the mind realm. Yes, that's the mind of ourself, right? If maybe sealed would be consciousness in us, and the logic of thought is in our minds, in the, let's call our being high-minded in the best sense, in the expansive clarity of thought. Also associated with the realm of Bria in the four worlds of Kabbalah. So we have sealed logic, the logic of thought, from spirit, from pure essence into mind. We have verbal logic, and that could be associated with the world of Yetzirah, which means formation in the four world model, but it's also has to do with the heart and words, the articulation, the connection, something that can be expressed. In order to be in relationship, we need to be able to speak. And finally, we get to this place of heard or revealed logic, which is when it can be received and understood and accepted, associated with the world of Asiyah, of action, of ourselves, our physical selves. Something that's really heard is something that's we can understand, we can live out. So he's comparing singles, tens, hundreds, and thousands to this process from the one into the many, the thousands being Alephim, the Alephs. And as much as we're talking about Aleph as this sort of pointer towards ineffability, it's also a channel, a medium through which the ineffable is able to begin to become known. Hahigayon hanishma, the heard or the revealed logic. Learning would come in the fourth striving, in the fourth system as heard logic, through listening closely. The fourth stage, its proliferation, literally the thousand of the manifolds, is its limitation. Wow. Let's look at this a little bit more closely. So learning to Aleph comes in this fourth stage, right? Aleph is the thousands. Aleph is the fourth order. You take a one, you add a zero. That's the second. You add another zero. That's 100. That's the third. You add another zero. That's the Aleph. And it is a process of being able to learn and digest it, but it comes through multiplication. The original source of the energy itself is a unity so unified that it is even beyond the concept of dual or non-dual. It's unask the question. There is no multiplicity here to speak of. And without a number two, do we need to say there's a number one? But as things become more digestible from the top of the tree to the bottom, not only are they more understood, they're also more multiplied. There's many beings that have been created, creatures, elements, energies that come into existence. And in so doing, they must necessarily be separated from their high energetic potential, from the essence that is housed in the oneness. As it is proliferated, it is not only multiplied, but it is limited, it's bounded. And that is the only way it can come into contact with us in this physical realm. So, as much as I said at the beginning that I hesitate to compare this simply with the Sephirotic model, I think it's different. It is worthwhile understanding what's being said here and perhaps using this as part of our tool. So there's a tendency to associate Aleph with Keter. Why? Well, Keter is nothingness. It's empty like the Aleph. It is the first one that emerges, yes. But Keter is not normally understood as a translator, as an in-between transitionary. Yeah, it is in between. It goes from the infinite to the nothingness, which leads to the somethingness. But its normal function is more about will and primordial thought and nothingness than it is about this sort of conduit of connection. So maybe there's some element of that here. But another way to think about Aleph might be the whole tree of itself. It is connected in with source at the highest dimension. And yet it is the translator. It is what allows the process of multiplying and limiting to happen in order for the world to be created, in order for created beings to be able to hear and to learn and to connect with divine source. So perhaps Aleph doesn't fit in super neat and tidy into the Sephirotic model. Maybe it's not quite Keter. Maybe it's not quite the whole thing. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's not quite Bina. Bina is a translator. That's one of the functions of the Divine Mother. The third Sephirah, which manifests. Bina translates from the most rarefied realms all the way to the most accessible. But What I want to say and put forward is perhaps Aleph is all of those things and it's none of them as well. It's a different system. Aleph is the fourth order of the multiplying of numbers, which causes the proliferation of the light, of the essence, of the source itself, vis-a-vis its boundedness and its limitation over time. A multiplier, a limiter, a transmitter that allows us to think, to bring our minds towards, to have consciousness of the primordial beginning. The upper yud of the Aleph reminds us of the richness, the multiplicity expressed in the very foundation of the number as it multiplies. So this upper yud, it reminds us of the richness, the multiplicity expressed in the very foundation of the number as it multiplies. All of this richness is stored inside of the one. Yud is the smallest letter. It's a point. It's a dot. And yet inside of it, everything exists. It foreshadows all of existence, though in and of itself it is tiny. It's a dot, but it also represents the number 10, this yud. It's the 10th letter. So here it's the singular, tiny speck and an indication of that multiplicity right there. So in its essence, at this upper yud, upper meaning at the top, connected up to the divine realm, this yud reminds us of the richness, the multiplicity expressed in the very foundation of the number as it multiplies. From this, we envision the majestic grandeur of the unity that holds multitude and the greatness contained within it. This Aleph allows us, through this upper yud, to meditate on the grandeur of the potency that is stored inside the singularity that pre-exists all multiplicity in our universe. From within the richness of the abundance that comes from the greatness. This is a literal translation as far as I could make it, while still attempting to be true to the words themselves and also to articulate something which sounds decent in English. So from the richness of the abundance that comes from the greatness, which bears within its power every multiplicity, every potency, every ever-increasing expansion, and every added yet bounded development, all of it flows from it. All of this is hinted at by this yud here, right at the beginning. If these kinds of teachings and perspectives interest you, I invite you to click the link below in the description and have access to a full lecture on the Introduction to Jewish Mysticism and the opportunity to register for a 10-part series online.